recorded, and it will be on the SAC website, which is www.storysaac.org. So it's the Storytelling Association of California website. You can go there in a day or two and find the recording if you'd like to see it, or if you want somebody else to see it. So every teller today will have 10 minutes. Every poet will have 10 minutes. We'll take a moment after each one so that we can comment, and you can all comment on their story or poetry if you'd like. Zoom participants will be muted during the presentation. Anytime a storyteller comes up here, we'll be unmuted. Anytime anybody on Zoom needs to tell their story, they'll have to unmute themselves, okay? In the event there are technical difficulties, we will try to get back on Zoom as soon as possible. Last month, we got bounced off. I don't know what happened, but it only took a few minutes to come back on, and hopefully that won't happen this time. So the theme for today is Women's History Month. It was recognized by Congress in 1987, and it really was a long time coming. National Women's Day was originally designated back in 1909 in a meeting of socialists and suffragists. In March of 1910, a German activist at the International Conference of Working Women in Copenhagen suggested that there should be an International Women's Day, and all 17 countries in attendance agreed that that would be a good idea. The special day wasn't recognized in the United States until the United Nations recognized it in 1975. In 1980, Jimmy Carter declared March 8th of that year the beginning of National Women's Week. And so now we're in National, Women's History Month. So really, really excited and very happy to celebrate Women's History Month with you all. There's so many reasons for celebrating women's history, and I'm proud that the Sacramento Storytellers Guild is celebrating it today with all of you. So Marsh also happens to be the owner of World Storytelling Day.
This is the first time my camera hasn't worked. What should I do?
Hold on, Judith. We're just introducing right now. Ed's going to mute you for a second, and I'll try to get back on with you. March also happens to be the owner of World Storytelling Day, and I'm pleased to declare here and now that we are honoring women all over the world by celebrating Women's History Month here. So with that, I'm going to introduce my first teller. And Ed Lewis is a mover and shaker in California's storytelling community. He is past president of the Storytellers Guild, and now he's a board member. He's an active member of the Storytellers Association of California, where he heads up 2 monthly programs, the Genre Storytelling Series and the Children's Storytelling Series. He's an expert in child development and still passionate about educating children through storytelling. The title of his story is The Unique Life of Nellie Bly O'Brien. Ed.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome to a fun day of storytelling. Lights, camera, action. Nellie Bly O'Brien was secretary to the silent film star Charlie Chaplin in the 1920s. She progressed to taking small parts in some of his silent films, and before long, she was a star with him in shows like The Kid and A Woman in Paris. Her big break came, though, when she went to the Sierras by Mammoth Lake with Randolph Scott and starred in The Thundering Herd. She fell in love with the mountains, and a few years later convinced her husband to move up to the Sierras, to the Eastern Sierras, where they bought a resort on Lundy Lake. It was a rundown resort. It hadn't been used for many years. And Nellie, on her own, tore down the old resort, took the usable lumber, and built her and her husband a cabin. 4 years later, She, along with help of some local folks, built this resort with 4 cabins, a restaurant, and a store. And she began hunting and fishing trips on horseback up in the mountains. And she became the first female licensed hunting and fishing guide in California. Now, she had many adventures during that time period, and she was also the first licensed female film projectionist in California in the early 1920s. She ran a resort until 1952, and then retired and took it easy. And taking it easy for Nellie meant building a unique house, which many of you can come and see today. It was an upside down house, completely upside down cabin. So when you come into it, when you open the door, on the floor, which is up here now, there is a bed, a cat, a chamber pot, a mouse, a table, some utensils, and it is a fascinating thing to see. And I found out about this from watching Huell Hauser and his California adventures. Yeah. And you can go to this. I went to it about 6 years ago. It's on Highway 35, just north of Mono Lake in a town called Lee Vining. And the house had went into disrepair, but in 2000, the local museum group got together, moved that house onto their property, and it's about 1 block off of Highway 395 in Lee Vining. Now, Nellie Bly O'Brien lived to be 91, and she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1984. So if you get the chance, head out to Lee Vining. It's a beautiful drive up 395 in the Eastern Sierras, and go check out this amazing woman's upside down house. Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Our next storyteller is visually impaired. Can you turn that up, please, so he can hear us? Our next storyteller is Sir Lawrence Crayson. He's blind and visually impaired and couldn't be here today, so we're going to have him on the phone. Larry, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I hope you all out there can hear us. If that's all the way for him. I mean, the people on Zoom. If everybody. So anyway, hold on a second. Forgot my notes here. So Larry has been a longtime member of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. He can't see the reaction of his audience because he's visually impaired. And because of this, he crafts his stories to evoke emotions of the heart and leave lasting effects on his listeners. He's told stories all across the country and in Canada with the Victoria Storytellers Guild. And the title of his story is called The Most Dangerous Woman in America. Thank you. Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. Mary Harris was born in Ireland, in Cork, Ireland. And when she was about 10 years old, her family immigrated to Canada, Toronto. She attended the Toronto Middle School and Normal School, which was a college, teacher college. She became a teacher. She learned sewing. She learned how to write novels. She also learned how to do speeches. When she got her first teaching job was in Michigan, and it was at a convent school off the shore of Lake Erie. She was bored with it after a few years, and she traveled to Chicago and set up her own seamstress job in her own shop. She got rich clients to sew draperies and dresses and so on, but fire. Even though she had her teaching credentials, she learned that Memphis needed teachers. So she moved down to Memphis, Tennessee, and soon after married a iron worker who was a union worker named George Jones. Between the two of them, they developed 4 kids in 6 years, and in 1878, the yellow fever struck Memphis. 5,000 people passed away, and Memphis became almost bankrupt. Not only that, but Mary lost her husband and all her 4 children. Then she moved back up to Chicago and learned about the plight of children laborers. In those days, in 1909, people worked sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. The minimum wage was 25 cents an hour. The youngest workers were 8 years old, working in mines and textile mills, which was very dangerous. So she organized 200 children to march from Philadelphia to Teddy Roosevelt's summer home in New York, over 100 miles, to protest the plight of children labor and try to reduce the number of hours to 55 hours a week. She was so successful that union workers take note of her organization, and invite her to many different mining areas of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky to protest the treatment of the miners. One way that she protested was in Pennsylvania. She organized the women, the wives of the miners who were on strike. And the scabs that were substituting were using mules. And so she asked the women to bring their pots and pans, hammers, brooms, anything that they could to distract the mules. And they ran up the hill screaming at the top of their lungs to scare the mules away. It worked. Unfortunately for the sheriff, who was hit by one of the frying pans that women were carrying, knocked him down the hill. They would not take no for an answer. Another thing that happened was when she went to West Virginia, her reputation preceded her, and many of the mining companies banned her from organizing union meetings in their towns. To get around that, she asked 2 miners, one to pretend that they were deaf, and the other one would yell, "Go out to hear Mother Jones outside of town." "What'd you say?" "Go out of town to hear Mother Jones talk about good news." "I can't hear you. What'd you say?" All through town. That was one way of advertising. Another place that she went to Kentucky, the mining company had hired thugs with machine guns to protect their property. Mother Jones knew that they were being harassed, the miners, so she got into a horse and buggy, rode up the dry bed of a river up to the mine. She was not on their property, she was in the riverbed, and she walked up to the gunner and put her hand on the muzzle of the gun and said, "You see these hills around here? There are 100 miners up there with guns. If you touch one hair of my head, something bad will happen to you." He lowered his gun. There were no miners up there. It was just a bluff. This little lady, who barely was 5 feet tall, all white hair, looked like a typical grandmother, wearing black dress, black hat, and white hair. But she was far from being a regular grandmother. Another place that she went to Colorado, Alabama, New York, all different places. Eventually, she was branded the most dangerous woman in America by lawyers who trying to stop her. She lived to be 93 years old and worked hard all through her life. She never did see her family again in Canada, but she had her family of minors. She called them her boys. There's a magazine still published in San Francisco, Mother Jones Magazine, that talks about fairness in the labor. Thank you for listening to my story.
Very good, very good. Wow. Right. Thanks, Larry. That was wonderful. I guess that was a lady you'd want on your side if you were in a battle, I think. So watch out for those pots and pans. Okay, Ed, am I still on? I'm on?
You're on.
Great. Our next speaker is, our next teller, I should say, is Joyce Ormond. Joyce is also a longtime member of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild and is our current vice president. You ready to be the president in about a year and a half?
No.
She loves the magic of storytelling that connects individuals. Storytelling to people, whether it's 1 or 1,000, gives her the greatest feeling of joy and pleasure. She believes everyone has important stories to tell, as do I think all of us. The title of her story is Lily Ball Anderson. She says, my admired woman comes from my family roots that go back to a birth in the colony of Virginia and a soldier in the Revolutionary War. They were all pioneers of different times. She was my grandmother, Lily Anderson, a descendant of John Proctor Jr. Joyce, please.
Good afternoon. I'm every woman. What does that mean to you? To me, it means Lily Ball Anderson. She was my grandmother. Now, I was the youngest of her grandchildren, or amongst the youngest. I didn't know her until it was later in her life, but she told me many, many stories. She grew up, was born and grew up on the Cosumnes River in what is now Amador County. She herded cattle in the spring and the fall. She, her brother, and her father herded her up to the Sierras to Anderson Valley. And then in the fall, they went and brought them back. So she could ride, rope, brand, build a fire, sleep on the ground. She was a pioneer woman. But she got married and moved to Sacramento to a 2-story Victorian house. When she married Ed Anderson, his family owned the valley. They had 3 children, one of which was my father, whom she said was the worst child she had ever seen in her life, which was good for me because I couldn't do anything wrong. My father could not discipline me in front of my grandmother. She was wonderful. Well, she had to go to work because her husband passed away right before her children were even completely born. And one of the jobs that she had was to work in a laundry, a big commercial laundry, where they had these big manacles that they pulled down. She accidentally got her hand caught. It got infected. There was no penicillin back then. So they amputated her wrist, took her hand off. The gangrene continued. They cut again, continued. They cut again, continued. The last cut was just 3 inches below her elbow, and there the gangrene stopped. I didn't know any of this. When I knew my grandmother, she was the landlady of a boarding house. She turned the main floor into 5 or 6 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and a little sitting room. She moved downstairs. big kitchen, big table, big living room, and her bedroom was over in the corner. She provided her boarders with a big breakfast and a big dinner 7 days a week. She packed lunches for the ones who needed to have lunch during the week. Sometimes that meant 6 days a week. Well, she'd gone through 2 wars and a depression. She grew a vegetable garden. She had fruit trees. They ate fresh what they had, and they canned what was left. And she didn't grow, she had chickens, some for laying eggs, some for eating. She had 2 huge laundry lines. Takes a lot of laundry to do all the linens once a week for 5 boarders or 6 boarders sometimes, and herself. Well, I had fun. She never said no. Can I help you do that? Sure. Can I help you do that? Sure. And I loved when the Iceman came. He came with a leather and a big ice with tongs. And he would take that over and he'd slip it into the ice box and close it. And grandmother said, the ice is very important. Keep things cold, but that's where I keep my insulin. And she would put her insulin on top of the ice. Was fascinated. She had a little enamel pot. She put it on the stove. She put the syringe. She put the needles. She boiled it 10 minutes, put a lid on, and then you went to the sink and you scrubbed. My grandmother taught me how to wash my hands. Every finger. Scrub under the nails, around the cuticles, get a sterile cloth, wipe your hands. The first job I got to do was swab, where she wanted to inject. And that was my first job. I scrubbed boy with that alcohol. Later on, I got to do the next job. When it was cool, you took off the lid, hands, took out the syringe, attached the needle, and give it to my grandmother. She would put that insulin in the crook of her arm. She would take, plunger down, insert it through a rubber tip, pull it back a little farther than it needed to go, then push it in. And if there were no bubbles, she pulled it out and injected where I had wiped. Later on, she let me do that. Later on, she let me do the drawing. I never got to the point where I got to do the injection part, but that's all right. When my grandmother wasn't feeling so well, and the family doctor who came to the house in those days came and said, Lily's organs are starting to fail. We all gathered in the kitchen around that big table, and we took turns going in and sitting alongside of my grandmother and holding her hand. I'd never done that before. And I was about 12 or 13, I guess. None of my cousins were there, but I said I wanted to be there. And of course, I got my way. I said to my father, what do I do? What do I say? Am I supposed to be quiet? My father said, you say whatever you want to say. Some people will pray, some people will talk, whatever you, the only thing you need to do for sure is hold her hand. That's what you're there for. So I went in, I took my turn, grabbed my grandmother's hand, held it, and knowing me, I'm sure I talked a blue streak. And I watched. She was laying in all white hair. And I watched her chest. Really. I don't know when I was talking and watching. All of a sudden, her eyes fluttered. And she looked at me directly, those big blue eyes. And she said, it's okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be just fine. And she closed her eyes and I watched. When I couldn't see her chest moving anymore, I went to get my father and sat down at the table, and he went in. He came back a few minutes later and he said, she's gone, she's passed. My grandmother was everything. She was every woman. She could rope, she could ride, she could herd, she could work, she could cook, she could can. She never met anything that she couldn't overcome. I wanted to be just like her. Yes. Lily Ball Anderson. But there's a footnote. Years later, I was 33 years old and was sitting and had been teaching school, was sitting in a summer workshop for special ed when one of the ladies said, well, my mother was handicapped because she lost her hand in an automobile accident. Of all the things I thought my grandmother could do, that was the first time I ever gave her the role of handicapped. And she only had half a left arm. I never saw it that way. Go, Grandma!
Wow.
All right.
Such a powerful story, Joyce. Thank you very much. Woo. I could see you riding horses too, getting out there with a rope. I'll bet you any money you did it.
I used to rope turkeys.
That was a very touching, very moving story. Thank you very much. A lot of people around here are wiping their eyes.
Yeah.
So our next poet, we have a poet up next. It's Sharon Smith, also known as Sharon Resolution. He's a spoken word poet and a poetry host. He's a board member and vice president for the Sacramento Poetry Center. He has written various chapbooks and has been well published in the Sacramento region. He's performed poetry in the Central Valley and in the Bay Area venues. He was a member of the 2018 Sac Slam team and founder of his poetry movement, a periodical called Lambic, a literary zine. Iambic. Oh, I'm sorry. Iambic, literary zine about the Sacramento poetry scene. He is a businessman running DJ and multimedia services for his company called A Serious Production. And he has an extensive resume, which is no surprise as he is an alum of Santa Clara University, which I know is an excellent university because that's where my daughter went to college as well. So anyway, Sharon Smith.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing out there? My name is Sharon Smith from Revolution. What?
Doing fine.
All right, cool. All right, then. But as much as it is Women's History Month, I always want to start off with something a little bit interesting to get things rolling, as I point out. This one here is called impediment. This may seem rude. Talking slowly just sounds crude, but to have effective conversation, I gotta do what I gotta do. I speak so fast, I speak in word piles. Words slip off my lips and become Scrabble tiles. 20 points for landing on double word space. A taste, playing Scrabble at my place. Is it absurd that my actions need verbs, that I have so much to say, but none of it's heard? Psst, a dummy with no ventriloquist. You think she'll get the gist? Would it be too wrong if I came too strong and I say, hey, you, bet, I wish my vocabulary was dense. So it wouldn't take me so long to state my intent. See, a way would be great. A week would be nice. A high would be fine. Just get me on base. See, when I talk to the ladies, they go, huh? What? And then I stand there and I get stuck because I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do. I need to do something because this is not cool. So, what part did you not understand? Was it hi, my name's Sharon, or do you have a man? It comes common when I communicate. I give compliments that just complicate because I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do. I need to do something because this is not cool. Mr. Speed, tell me why she's not hooked to this lost boy elegant like a book. Loving you with evening delights. I dream a little dream that you want me tonight. Splashing a little vanilla on satin. Passion, it's a process of relaxing. But as soon as I get over this word hurdle, let's insert those times that I shared. Hope you're prepared. Let me be clear, I will love you here. See, when I talk to the ladies, they go, huh? What? Then I stand there and I get stuck because I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do. I need to do something because this is not cool. So why am I hesitant? Because I want you to like me. Isn't it obvious? Seal the deal at high speed. I see. Your face speaks lies. Remove your disguise. It's written on your eyes. Here's a fact. 9% of Black kids have speech disorders. And sons are 3 times likely to have it more than daughters. So as an executive or blue collar, I'm going to have this problem. So why even bother? Do I sound unintelligent? Well, let this pen and pad state my intent. See, I got a parcel of rhymes that I use in poetry, corrected with different schemes so you would notice me. So for this to happen massively, to master this catastrophe, you might have to change drastically. Classically, I'm used to verbal wounds from society. But a strong will needs notoriety. So when I talk to the ladies and they go, huh? What? Yo, I won't stand there and I will not get stuck because I know what to say and I know what to do. So if I can get your number, will Facebook do? All right. Something to start it off with, yes. All right, this one here is called Missed Opportunity. I walked onto a bus. She was sitting right there. Slow motion, a smile appeared on her face. I sat, indirect from a distance. Scanner dimensions, making a decision, should I do this? Because it's making her uncomfortable. Scanning my mind, lines I design, I decide to mumble to myself. Her lips serenade a song. Her hair swayed from side to side with hair silky long. It was beautiful. Black as onyx, with high heel boots from onyx stone, she was unique from head to toe. The beauty she admit, 6 o'clock in the morning, and she looks like this. Do you have a man or someone you lay with? Because if I had that title, this is what I would do. I would chant your name. I would do a little dance. And I would say a prayer. and say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of your community, a wonderland of dreams, a happy birthday to you from me, a marriage proposal scene, giving birth to child number 3, feeling serendipity. I shook my head because I drift. She got up, got off. An opportunity missed. All right. So here's my final one. And this one goes out to my grandmother. I lost her 15 years ago and stuff. And she's been a real person to my life. This is my dad's mom, and I lost my father too. So this is a story about her called Grandma's Best Friend. Thank you for being a friend. Travel back the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. Grandma was content in her advanced years, but she was more friendly with her friend T. T was Grandma's best thing to have around. She would tell stories full of adventures, drama, political, and conversational. Grandma thought it was amusing. I saw T, short in stature, but full of life. Always looking for the good things of giving, but love good living. But very talkative. Grandma thought it was amusing and loved her very much. I asked Grandma one day, I said, Grandma, what is it about T that you like? Well, T is always here with me. But Grandma, you got a family. But where are they? They're not here, as you can see. My grandma was right. She was a loner in her house, the hub to my family. And even though my family would come and go, T was always there to tuck her in and let her sleep. And even T knew when to leave when my grandma was very tired. It's something that always made me think about, when there's a joke you owe, friends don't fade away. Sometimes you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. 'Cause I'll be there for you, like you're there for me too. Until that one day where I walked in and T was talking. And my grandma stopped listening. Not because she was rude. She just fell asleep. And I walked over, but T was still talking. And I checked on her, but there was no response. But T was still talking. I was getting more and more worried, but T was still talking. I was checking her vitals. There was nothing. T was still talking. I looked at T and I was wondering, why T are you still talking? Making a day in the world today, taste everything you got. Making a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. Boom, 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 boom. And they always glad you came. You want to be where people see the troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. You want to go where people know troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. Silence! But T would not. So I walked over and turned the TV off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was very powerful, very moving. And believe me, I think every guy in here knows what it means to miss that opportunity. But your grandma sounded like a wonderful person. So sandwiched between a couple of poets is J.R. or Judith Nacken. She's going to be our first Zoom participant for today. So my technician is over there. Ed Lewis is doubling today as a technician. He's going to add her as a spotlight so she can come up. Let me know when she's up there, Ed.
She is up here.
Okay, so Judith is a recent inhabitant, of Crowder, Oklahoma. Population 422 people. Imagine that. Retired accountant, now full-time manuscript editor. She has 5 published books available on Amazon. She's one of Ed Lewis's many female fans. Well, she qualifies as actually her late husband and Ed's dad were fast friends. The title of her story is In the Seat of Idols. So Judith, please bless us with your story.
Okay. I think it's wonderful that we have a month for women and these kinds of dues honoring women. I had a strange childhood because I didn't have any women role models. At least I didn't choose any to speak of when I was very young. My mama was timid. She painted and sculpted and stayed in the house, and in her final years, she was agoraphobic. I didn't want to be like my mama. Her sisters were farm wives. They were loud and worked hard in the fields and had sunburned necks, and I didn't want to have a sunburned neck either. When I was like in the 7th grade in Iroquois, South Dakota, which was a really step up from Osceola, where I had lived, population 50. Iroquois was population 320. And in the 7th grade, I had a school teacher named Miss Ruth Ramsel. And she was tall and willowy, and you know, this is in the late 40s, and she has swirly skirts. And I didn't look very good in swirly skirts because I was kind of tubby. But she said, gonna. What I mean is, she said, instead of I'm going to go to the store, she said, I'm gonna go to the store. I'm gonna go to the store. Man, I did idolize her. And I was about 45 before I quit saying gonna. I did impersonate a person all of my young life and well into my 20s and 30s. I went in this little town of Iroquois when I was in early high school years. There was a lady that I really modeled myself after, and she was Mrs. Haberstad, and she was the wife of the junior banker, and she was blonde and always wore shirt sleeve dresses, you know, freshly ironed, had one little blonde daughter who minded well, and she was the wife of the junior banker in the little town of Iroquois, South Dakota. And now this is like 1950, 1951, and I had to walk past her house to go to school. And one day, her big lilac bush bent out over the street, and I thought I'd take my mama a lilac. And Mrs. Haberstad came from the house, and she said, Judy, you don't want to steal, even if it's a lilac for your mama. And her voice was so sweet and so modulated. And I tried really hard. She wore glasses and she was still beautiful. And I'd worn glasses since I was 4 years old, and I was ugly. So I went on into young adulthood, always the misfit. I did everything I could do. I bought perfume that I hate. I really, to this day, hate scent. I wore hats, you know, in the 50s and 60s, women didn't go downtown if they didn't have a hat and gloves, not good middle class women. I tried, I bought hats. I had haircuts. I bought wigs because my hair was so awful. And ladies played bridge. So in a city where I moved sometime later, I went to the bridge place and learned how to play bridge. And now we'll fast forward several years till I'm in my late 30s, early 40s, still impersonating a person, still never fitting with women nor having a woman role model, because I had either deserted these semi-models over the years or they had let me down in some manner. And there was a woman in the bridge group where I landed in Spokane, Washington, and she was the wife of an attorney. I knew that. And she, if it weren't the 70s, if it were the 50s or 60s, she'd have worn a hat and matching gloves to the bridge game, I know. But she had a quiet and well-modulated voice, and she never bitched and moaned at the other bridge players like so many of them do. And I really idolized her. One day, and I started going to the center to play when I knew on the days that she played. And one day I was in a foursome with her, and somebody complimented her on her fine complexion. Now, I had never talked to her. I didn't know her name. I just kind of adored her from afar. But she told this sweet story about how when she went to college, the last thing her mother told her was to be sure that before she went to bed at night, she creamed her face. And so when she said, when I'd get into all hours of the night, I could hear my mother saying, cream your face, cream your face. And I always did. And that, of course, is why my complexion is what it is. And I lost my head and patted my ample hip and said, my mother only left me one tape. It was clean your plate. And everybody laughed at the top of their lungs, and I was so embarrassed because there I'd put my foot in it again, you know. I stayed away from the bridge game for a couple of weeks. I'm never going to fit in, you know. I'm okay in the poker game with the boys, but I'm never, ever going to fit in, no matter how many hats I buy or no how many bridge games I learn to play. Well, the bridge, I miss playing the game. I really love to play cards and miss playing the game. And the bridge place was being remodeled, and they were playing in the basement of an old antiquated office building in downtown Spokane. And I went down there to play that day, or that evening, actually. And so it was a kind of a break time, and I had waited too long to go to the John, and I raced downstairs to their one little one-holer bathroom for women. And my lady idol was standing there waiting to get in, and somebody came out and she went in. I didn't talk to her, of course. You know, cats don't, they can look at queens, but they don't talk to them. So she came out and I went on in, and I want to tell you that in that very moment, this woman changed my life. From that very moment, I no longer wanted to be someone else. From that very moment, I accumulated women friends. Most of them not much like me, but some of them are. And I never, ever once again ever wanted to be anyone but old J.R. Judith Nacken. As I went in and plopped down in that woman's warm urine, I realized that her mother had left her another tape. Don't sit on public toilets. And I have never known her name. Thank you.
Are we on it? Yeah. Judith, that was great. I was so happy that you were able to join us all the way from Oklahoma. What a treat it is to have Zoom. All over the country, sometimes all over the world. Anyway, thank you for that. Wonderful.
I want to say hello to my mother.
Okay,
Hi, Mom.
who's that? Who's that?
This is Dorcas Lee Klecki, Judith Knacken's mother. Very proud of her.
Oh, we're very welcome.
Hi, baby. I didn't know you were there.
I know, hanging up now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Ed, you ready for the next one?
Okay, here we go.
All right, we have our second poet of today. Her name is Sharon Mahaney. She is a California native. I am too. How many California natives are there in this? Wow, I've never seen this many California natives in the same place. That's great. She is a retired recreation supervisor for the city of Rockland. She is now substitute teaching at local schools and contributes to poetry journals such as Voices, Song of the San Joaquin, and Poetry P. Discovering that if your work gets selected, you're rewarded with a contributor's copy. I did not know that. So hopefully I'll get published someday. Sharon was honored with the 2021 Golden Pegasus Award from the California Federation of Chaparral Poets. Yeah, for her shaped poem, We Only Darn the Large Holes. I love that title. She has a fondness for ekphrastic poetry. Do you all know what that is? I didn't know what it was. I'd like to see some ekphrastic poetry on that picture that was behind Judith Naken. Did you notice that picture that was behind her? Knocking? Yeah, it was really cool. Anyway, that's basically poetry based on pictures, paintings, right?
Yes,
And
any kind of art.
and done, any kind of art, and done well, the poet really, I mean, you can just see it in your mind. So it takes quite a talent to do that. She's working on her own genre of phenomenon poetry as well. So Sharon, if you can please join us, that would be great. No, you want me to hold this?
I'll hold it. I just need some refreshers for the time.
Maybe.
I can read the first one while he's doing that if you want.
There you go.
Oh, here it comes.
That's okay. We can get the podium set up. No problem.
We're not in a hurry.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Well, we're getting our podium set up here.
Selection.
You gotta bend.
I need to go in front of the camera.
Probably.
Is that going to be in the way? Is that okay?
There you go.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I didn't have a whole lot of women's history poems, but I thought I've got some poems about the different phases of a woman's life. So this is maybe from childhood. It's called The One Not Invited to Play. The one not invited to play summons a secret child to peel herself from the mirror and take.
Is that your phone?
Oh, yeah. Okay, just tell me when my
Don't
time
worry
is
about
up
the
then.
time.
Okay,
Technical difficulty here.
it should be off now? Here.
No.
I'll just.
We were getting.
Making a little move here. We're getting right back in 1 second. Here we
That
go.
sounds better, right?
Yes.
Okay, the one not invited to play summons a secret child to peel herself from the mirror and to take tea. Grasps the spoon between fingertips and shakes slowly the sugar from the silver. Tips the cup to her lips, smiles not at pleasantries, but looks to the sky, imagines finches on the rims of the cups, butterflies encircling prayer cloths, clunking bells, tattling her name, jaguars rubbing against her knees before disappearing in a clearing behind trees, drums beating from her heart,
Hey,
stirring a
is
soulful,
Sterling currently licensed?
vengeful growling.
When you got him,
Well, fix
he
that.
would have had to have been licensed.
Who's not muted?
Somebody's not muted.
Can you play that? I can't really see.
I think it's my daughter's phone. I think that Lee up there is my daughter.
So
Okay,
sorry,
everyone,
just turn that
we're
off.
trying to mute everyone.
almost got it. You probably got it by now.
Just click the button on the right and that one will go off.
I got her. Okay,
Yeah, it was her.
you're good. So sorry.
It's all right. Should I do the next one?
No, go ahead, just do it over.
Do it again?
Yeah, start over. Like you're the whole thing.
Okay. The one not invited to play summons a secret child to peel herself from the mirror and take tea. Grasps the spoon between fingertips and shakes slowly the sugar from the silver. Tips the cup to her lips, smiles not at pleasantries, but looks to the sky, imagines finches on the rims of cups, butterflies encircling prayer cloths, clunking bells tattling her name, jaguars rubbing against her knees before disappearing into a clearing behind trees, drums beating from her heart, stirring a soulful, vengeful growling. So this is a childhood memory. I don't know if you have all been to the creek when you were a child. But we used to go cardboard sliding.
Yes.
So this is crossing the creek. I remember walking down to the creek with friends to the place where we were told not to go because bums lived under the bridge, might hear you, might get you. I remember carrying an awful armful of cardboard, sourced from boxes we had folded and flattened and layered, not seeing past its girth, the 2 city blocks to the makeshift park, then wading knee deep across the stream to the other side, to the hill. We waded again, this time through long untended grass to the top of the vortex, grasped both sides, bearing down the slick sheet of brown fiber, the only thing between us and our desires. We hunkered forward on pretend paper thrones, shoulders out, crowns high, smiles as big as danger. We slid feet first, face first. We bumped and tumbled, staining our clothes, our knees, with the green of our knoll. We raced, proclaimed ourselves kings of the mountain, breathing deep the summer air on the climbs uphill. I thought, this is what it must be like, going to the other side. Yes, this is what it must feel like to live on the other side of fear. We rode the hill again and again, the sounds of friendship and freedom echoing in laughter until sunlight waded into night and we could hear our mothers calling our names.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is about the relationship of a daughter and her father. Playing catch. I wore a symbol of childhood on the palm of my hand, eventually. First, it was oiled and folded, a simulation of being weathered and worn. The leather ties restrung, reknotted. So exciting to get a real full-sized mitt like the pros used. My dad's enthusiasm spread to me. I think it was signed by some guy people had heard about. Told I couldn't use it yet. Had to go through preseason conditioning under my mattress with oil and a ball in its womb. I didn't know about this part of the deal. My brother didn't have to birth his glove. He just went out to the street and caught balls. Dad and I checked the gestation each night, would fold back the mattress before bedtime, before tuck-ins, to see the progress, see if its belly was softened and prepared. For 2 extra weeks, I slept on a mound, knowing this action would eventually pay off. Dreams of pop flies, double plays, catching the dang thing when my father pitched it to me. So much attention paid to that cupped piece of leather. Dad's way of paying attention to me, readying me for the greater things of life, the only way he knew how.
Yes.
Do you have time for a couple more? Okay. The end of a long, hot trail above Camp Augusta. So this was going away to camp. The creek girdled in small, sparkling pockets, trickling, chanting songs, nature chimes, echoing foothills, plunging past grand orange boulders, shoulders sprung with pines and burls, churning clear water, chasing sunlight, running across, down, circumventing huge granite sheets of gray, black, beige pyrite, specks of history compressed into solid beds. Young girls laid out like mermaids, goddesses of granite towers, spray falling onto golden shoulders, untangling braids, dripping toes into ice-cold creek. Others seated crisscross, swirling shiny circles with their fingertips, chatting a bubbling blooming, immersed, drenched, or drying. We could barely feel our legs after the long hike, hot, dusty, dehydrated. We desired nothing more than to enter this enchantment. Not a word was said as we dropped our gear and dared flow into the dream.
Nice.
Okay. So I'll end with one more.
Yes, sure.
Okay. I don't know which one you would like the most. I think I'll do 5th grade. Okay. 5th grade story. This is room 19. Class began with Mrs. Procisi calling the boys master this and master that in her booming masculine voice, her substantial floral dresses the focal point during lecture, seasonally correct. Orange and brown for October, bold red blobs for December and February, and large purple flowers most other days. If she taught today, she would certainly be styled with purple hair, tall leather boots, and a sizable tattoo of Italy running the length of her arm, with some foreign slogan she would have to explain to us over and over. Her class was one of laughter and loudness. Neighboring rooms could hear our business. There was no hiding in Mrs. Procisi's class. Back when patriotism was true and presidents were heroes, class content consisted of flags and locations of wars where brothers and brothers fought the other or themselves. Sisters were free of all burden of war. Sisters sewed flags, peeked out windows, hid or moved the hiding, rarely seen or heard from in men's history books, except Sacagawea, who led on-land explorers. Not till Mrs. Procisi hollered your name, Ms. Mahaney or Mistress Mahaney, then you were a country seen and heard from. The landscape of the classroom broadened its broadcast to discover you in a small pastel print dress with your untried voice, now owning your responsibility to enunciate clearly and represent your territory. You stand up and answer the question at hand amid a few snickers. For several days, these snickers follow you, especially from behind, from Master Richard Tapia. You keep seeing his eyes on you, and a big mischievous smile. He's up to something. He points to his eyes and nods, then to his underarm. I like it, he whispers, as if in your ear. You notice you're wearing your favorite white eyelet blouse, punched out holes to reveal dainty no-seams, tiny dots of fresh pink skin that are to look like fabric. In the restroom, you look in the mirror and do a self-examination. What could possibly be laughable? Moving arms in any direction but down yields a gaping expanse of underarm flesh, some of it virgin breast. Oh no, the armpit vantage point. You are mortified. He sees what he is seeking, a peep show. You haven't seen them yourself. This heathen is the first to explore you with his superscopic vision. Your response is to walk like a soldier the whole day and avoid eye contact. Word has spread. More snickers. Now others are angling their chairs and smiling. You are now a regular shame show. Your face flashes red. You tense and look away. If running away were an option, you'd be on the first flight out. But you breathe deeply and try to calm your red face with strong intent, arms in tight. He will always retain the memory of your memory. You accept the shame and pride yourself that if he were ever to see under your shirt again, you will look fully transformed, like a different person. Soon it will be time for 6th grade and a bra. Soon there will be much more to see and tighter restrictions to access. It will be years until this country intentionally opens its borders. With you, the crossing guard, fashionista, master of ceremony.
Way to close that out, Sharon. Great.
Is my next week?
Oh, leave this here for you? Okay. That was wonderful. It's that having the poets come to our programs, I think it's just been such a real delight and such an enhancement to everything. So
Yeah.
we really do
Yes.
love it and appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is a Zoomer. We got to get my technical guy on board here. Dave Tarvin is coming from Auburn, California. Dave is a retired public servant, as am I, whose main interest in storytelling is telling stories for and about seniors. The title of his story is The Golden Thimble, a fictional tale based out of Eastern Europe, along with some real experiences with his grandmother. We ready, Ed?
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, take it away.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name indeed is Dave, and I'm happy to be here today. So this story is inspired by a fairy tale from the 13th century. And as such, the story is mainly true, but the parts about my grandmother, they are always true. And the story starts on a Sunday morning in Los Angeles. I often spent the weekend with my grandparents, and I was with my grandmother at church, and we were standing in the entryway to the church. Now, this church had a small entryway with this huge wall, and when you went in, you either turned to the right or to the left, and it had this huge mural on it. And the pastor, he was standing there and talking to people as they would come in. And so he and my grandmother were talking, and I was standing there, and I didn't have anything to talk to them about. So I was staring at this mural, and oh, it was one of those deeply religious, beautiful murals of Jesus standing up in the hills and sheep everywhere. And all of a sudden, the pastor turned to me. Now I was just a little boy. I mean, I was like 7. And the pastor says, "Well, are you excited to be here today? Jesus will be here soon." I said, "Really? Where is he?" And the pastor said, "Well, we don't really know, but he'll be here." And I said, "Well, I know where he is." The pastor said, "Where?" I said, "He's up in those darn hills looking for those sheep." Well, my grandmother got a little embarrassed and kind of hustled me out of there, and we sat in the back in the pews, and pastor eventually got up and he started his sermon, and pretty soon I started to kind of wander. And as I was kind of looking around the room, all of a sudden I noticed this young woman that I had never seen before in the church. She was about 19 or 20. And I was just at that age where I had discovered girls. And I couldn't take my eyes off of this young woman. My heart started to beat and I had this odd feeling and I couldn't stop staring. My grandmother, she turned to me and she said, "Dave, it's rude to stare. Stop staring." So I did. The church service ended and people were socializing. And again, I was staring at that young woman, and my grandmother again redirected me and said, "Dave, it's not polite to stare." So I didn't. But I overheard this young woman tell my grandmother that she wanted to come to her weekly quilting group. Now, my grandmother was an old country girl, and she had this special quilting room that none of us boys were ever allowed to go into. It was a special room, all set up for quilting. And once a week, every Saturday morning, all the women would come over to my grandmother's house and they would work on these quilts. And they would give them to people who were sick and in the hospital, or poor people in the area or through the church. And they, of course, they would socialize. Well, the next Saturday, or when the Saturday came up, I made sure that I was at Grandma's house early. And all those women showed up for that quilting session. And sure enough, that young woman showed up. And so they were all in that room quilting away, and I snuck over to the doorway. I didn't go in the room. I stood outside by the door. The door was open, and I just watched them all working away on that quilt. And they were all talking and chatting it up. All of a sudden, this young woman, she turns to my grandmother and she says, "I heard that you are the greatest sewing woman in the whole Los Angeles basin. You make the best quilts. You do the best embroidery. And I also heard that you have a magic thimble." Well, my grandmother was pretty well known for her sewing work and her quilting and her embroidery. And my grandmother looked at her and she said, "Well," she said, "it's a special thimble, but if you want it, you could have it." And so the girl took it. She said, "Thank you. You know, I really wanted that thimble because I want to be the greatest seamstress in the Los Angeles basin." And so they went on sewing and sewing and sewing. The group was over. The next day we went to church. The week wore on, and then pretty soon it was the next Saturday. And again, I was at my grandmother's house. And again, I stood in the doorway, and all those women were there, and they were all sewing a big quilt. After a while, this young woman looked over at my grandmother, and she had that thimble in her hand. She held it up like that, and then she reached across this big quilt, and she held it out to my grandmother, and she said, "I'd like you to take this thimble back." She said, "This is no magic thimble." She said, "I used it all week. My embroidery is just as bad as it was before." She said, "Nothing's changed. There's no magic in this thimble." And she held it out. My grandmother took that thimble. She just stood there for a minute. I could sense that she was kind of thinking, and she turned to me. She knew I was in that doorway. She motioned me over, and I went and I stood next to her. When I was standing right next to her, she put her hand down right on my shoulder. And she held that thimble up to the light, and the light kind of danced off of it. It was a golden thimble with this design all over it. She said, the thimble itself isn't magical. She said, it's a symbol. She said, you see that fancy design all around the thimble? She said, that is the fleur de lis. That is a symbol of purity. It is a symbol of the love that we have, that we all have for our families, for our husbands, our children, our church, our community, our neighbors at large. And that's the magic in this thimble. It is the true love that we feel for others. She took that thimble and she handed it to me. And then they all went back to talking and talking and so on and so on and so on. And pretty soon the quilting time was gone and all those women left. My grandmother sat me down and she said, Dave, I want you to keep that thimble. And I want you to remember what I said. When you grow up and when you get married, I want you to give that thimble to the right woman. Well, I did what all boys do. I forgot all about what Grandma said. I grew up. I didn't lose that thimble. I did, however, misplace it. It went into one of those little boxes that we all have that we stuff under our bed, and time went on and I lost track of it. And as a young man, I kept looking for that beautiful woman that brought those feelings up. But that didn't kind of work for me. And I just kept getting into these relationships. And one day, after one of those disasters, we've all had them, I was sitting in my chair in my living room, and suddenly I remember Grandma's little speech. And I thought, where's that thimble? Where's that thimble? And I went out into the garage and I went through all my old boxes. I couldn't find it. I drove over to my storage unit and I started tearing boxes down off of the wall. And I went through them until finally I found this old shoebox, and I found the old tarnished golden thimble. And I remembered that story. Felt so good just to hold that thimble in my hand. And so I took it home and I polished it up a little bit and I put it in my pocket, but kind of hard to carry that around. I thought, I'm not going to give some woman a thimble. What woman sews today? And so I had this friend of mine, Art. Art was an artist. And I gave him that thimble. I said, buddy, you make this into something for me so I can carry it around with me. 2 weeks later, he called me up on the phone and I went over to his house and he said, I made something. And he gave me this. He gave me this little locket that I wear with me all the time so that I can always remember my grandmother and true love. Thank you.
Great story, David Tarvin. Appreciate you. I always appreciate your stories. They're always go right to the heart. And I want to get a closer look at that locket next time you see you in person. Our last storyteller for the day is Karen Daly. Karen has done a lot of presentations. She's also a longtime board member. She's an invaluable board member and treasurer of our guild, as a matter of fact. She has been doing storytelling through Toastmasters clubs for 30-something years, and is a great person to give positive critique to all of us new storytellers like myself. So she's honed her skills in storytelling through Toastmasters. The title of her story is Teata, a Native American storyteller that traveled worldwide, educating the world about her beautiful culture. Karen, please join us.
Okay. I need to give a prelude to this. I have to apologize. Normally, I wouldn't tell a story without having it fully memorized. But I was in a Toastmaster contest last night. And so for the last 2 weeks, my attention has been fully to be able to do that speech. And I won, so it was worth it. But at the same time, I wasn't able to give full attention. So this morning, I really tried to work on it. So I hope you will be generous and let me read. I try not to read all the story, but part of the story. Teate was an Indian storyteller by calling, but Mary Frances Thompson was what she was born on December 3rd, 1895 in Emmett, a Chickasaw Indian Territory, which is now Johnsonville, Oklahoma. Her parents were Thomas Benjamin Thompson, a Chickasaw, and Bertie Thompson. Her early education were in a one-story tribal schoolroom. And 2 years later, her parents sent her off to Bloomfield Academy, which was a Chickasaw boarding school for little girls. After she graduated from high school in 1915, she enrolled in what was then called Oklahoma's College for Women. It's now Oklahoma's University College of Arts and Science. When she attended college, she worked to help pay for the tuition. She worked as the assistant in the theater department. And she was tutored by Frances Dinsmore Davis. And that was where she learned all about the stage. Ms. Davis was the one that encouraged Mary to change her name because of her gift of telling Native American Indian stories. The word Teate is actually not a Chickasaw word. You can find it with that spelling in the New Zealand Aboriginal word for the morning. But some of the Chickasaw speakers believe it actually came from the name Itahata, which in Chickasaw, in the old Chickasaw language, meant cottonwood or a birch tree. So they think that she may have changed it, accentuated it, but they also inferred it may have been for the white man to be able to say it, was changed to Teate. In her senior year, she performed songs and dances and stories of many different Indian tribes. They were so well received that she was asked to go out to the other institutions to do the same performance. After graduation, she was offered a part in the Chicago traveling circuit by Thurlow Lawrence, who had seen her performances in the college. She traveled across the United States and honed her skill as a storyteller and performer. But she wanted to further her training, so she went back and she joined the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh, which I didn't know was in Pittsburgh, before she moved to New York City. And there she performed in many Broadway productions. She shared her apartment with a fellow educator and performance, Mary Stone McLennan. And in 1924, McCall's magazine featured Teata in the Types of the American Beauty series. In 1933, she married the love of her life, Dr. George Clyde Fisher in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and he supported her talent throughout his life. Eleanor Roosevelt, whose husband then, Franklin D., was governor of New York City at that time, invited Teata to perform at the governor's mansion. And then when Franklin was elected president, she was again invited to the White House to tell and perform at his very first state dinner. Teata then performed at Hyde Park for the Roosevelts and their visiting guests, King George and Queen Elizabeth of England. And Queen Elizabeth was so enthralled, she invited her to come to England to perform, which she did. In her 60 years of storytelling, yes, 60 years of storytelling, she visited 7 countries, was introduced to a number of famous people, Albert Einstein, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, just to name a few. She collected hundreds of stories from different tribal groups, such as there are birds of many colors, the corn ceremony, the blue duck. The Chickasaw storyteller Lynn Mononi, who studied with Teata, published an illustrated book adaptation from Teata's story of the baby rattlesnake in 1986. Her life and performances have been commemorated throughout with several different awards. And I think one that would be very special is that she was the Lady Home Journal, old magazine for many of us, the Ladies Home Journal Woman of the Year in 1976. She was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 1957, was Oklahoma's official state treasurer, who would know, in 1987, and in 1990, she was inducted into the Chickasaw Hall of Fame. In 2000, a play based on her life won five Tribal Best American Indian Musical Award. And in 2014, the Chickasaw Nation began production on a film based on Teata's life. It was released in October of 2017. And if you go to your Netflix, you can see the life and times of Teata. At age 99, Teata Fisher died in Oklahoma City. She was a remarkable, it was so hard to condense so much into just a 7-minute presentation. She was a remarkable storyteller. And although I normally would not have told this, I couldn't think of a better month than March, Women's History Month, to share her story. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Wonderful story to honor a really, truly great woman. I've seen that Netflix show. It's really very, very good, and it'd be well worth your time to go and watch it. Well, that basically wraps it up. I mean, normally when we did Zoom, we'd all bring up all of the tellers at the same time. Would you all like to come on up here and take a bow? Yeah. Tellers, come on up here and take a bow, guys.
Can we bring the Zoom up? Can you?
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
I mean, you come on up, just stand here, and thank you all, and I'll unmute everybody. Everybody
Yep.
can unmute and say anything you want. If you'd like to, say hello.
Can you see us all on the screen?
Almost. Ed, move this way. Ed, move this way.
Turn
This way.
sideways, turn this way.
There you go, right there. Right there.
This way. Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Now we can all get in there. Yay!
Let me spotlight, add spotlight for Dave, and let me add the spotlight for Judith. Oh, Judith had to leave.
Judith had to leave.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. Anyway, everybody, I really appreciate you being with us to celebrate Women's History Month. The tellers and the poets, you guys did a great job. It was such a great way to spend the afternoon. And thank you, audience, for being out there with us as well.
Oh, definitely.
All right.
Can't do it without an audience.
Yeah, next month, we are going to have the Liars Contest that Mr. Ed Lewis will be hosting. And so we'll be sending out information about that at another time. It's a very fun event where you just get to hear the wildest stories ever. And it's a competition. The winner gets $100.
Yes, $100.
And so we'll be putting out more information about that as we go. So thank you once again, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Great hosting, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank our host.
Okay, everybody, thanks for coming. Anybody have anything to say? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself.
That sounds good.